AI is moving so quickly, what would be your advice to them when it comes to using AI?
I usually try to think of it in terms of individual user productivity.
A strategic application of AI is not starting from the tool and then try to find a use case.
Was there a specific use case that you weren't able to solve traditionally that led to this choice, or is it just experimentation?
What I see is it makes our internal software teams actually easier to work with each other because of this very point. Like one software team can build the agent against their APIs and that type of component, and then the agents talk.
Technology's coming, get on the train, get hit by the train.
You know, I would tell you that there's an easy path. For that, I think the challenge is just data.
I love panels like this. We don't have time for all of you to appreciate the gravity of the experience that a lot of these individuals have. I'm amazed they've gotten past their egos. I'd like to kick it off by having each of them do an intro, spend a minute or two letting people know your background from technology, but also the other side that I appreciate with this group is they're adults. So they're not just technophiles that like to nerd out. I'm sure they have part of that in them, but they understand how to have a conversation with a CFO and how to have accountability. So kick it off with you, John, and go down the line.
Sounds good. I'll keep it short. John Nicastro, CTO for Major League Soccer. I grew up a network and system engineer, so a lot of tech background. Long story short, I was lucky enough to kind of go through different industries and verticals and play in B2C and B2B and enterprise software, telecom, spent time at companies like Netflix, Pandora and Sirius, and now I'm in sports. So I consider myself privileged in this field to kind of apply a hobby. I'm a workaholic. I love what I do. My niece comes up to me all the time and says, "What do you do?" And I'm like, I just don't stop. I keep moving. That's my job. And so that's it. So thanks for having us.
Hey everyone, my name is Ayan, Bhattacharya. I lead Gen AI for Capgemini, which is a global consulting firm. And I've been working in this space over the last 12 years, prior to Cap at Deloitte Consulting and IBM Watson when it was founded. My focus has been largely helping Fortune 500 clients adopt AI across different dimensions. So whether it's the current flavor of how do you apply agentic to solve supply chain, or looking at some of the previous speakers' comments about the utility space and how do you modernize the tech stack. And I've been working with Ben over the last few years in some of his roles to really democratize the access to data and insights using AI. So happy to be here.
I'm Andrew Howard, I spoke earlier, so I'm the CEO of Blockchain, and I've been in a startup for the last 2 years trying to bring this kind of great technology into the financial services space.
Hey everybody, so I'm student turned panel advisor, I guess, on this. I used to be in your seat literally for this class about a couple of years ago. And so I'm head of strategy and IT for Syngenta Group. We're an agricultural company, roughly around 50,000 people, 30 billion in gross revenue, plus or minus two. Ag's having a couple bad years, so we're down a couple billion right now. And in about 90 countries around the world. So from an AI standpoint, we got started when it came out. So we do everything from inputs for ag, crop protection, seed, biologicals, digital. We work in every supply chain from B2C to B2B in that nature. So glad to be here.
Great. Yeah. Hi, my name is Fei Wu. I'm currently a managing director and leading the technology for Macquarie Asset Management, about 600 billion assets under management, both in public and the private space. My background has been very technology driven and pretty much spent my entire career in financial services with large GCV kind of banks, including Bank of New York, Royal Bank Canada. By training, I'm actually 25 years ago, received my PhD in AI and a master too. But I think my role has been more than AI. I look after all technology and data, digital as well.
Okay. Great. So selfishly, I need to leave with new ideas and I need to get smarter. And I think that's also the hope for the panel. So the style, if someone's answering a question and that spurs a new thought, jump in. Think about this as, having a conversation among friends. So I think for the first question, and we don't have to round robin all the questions. So if it's not that interesting, if you want to pass, you're welcome to pass. So I think for the first question, put yourselves in the shoes of some of the people in the audience where maybe they don't have backgrounds that are as technical. But AI is moving so quickly. What would be your advice to them when it comes to using AI? How much should they use it every day? Should they learn to program, not program? If you were putting yourself out there as a CEO, COO, what would be your advice to keep up in the AI race? So
I can get us started. I mean, I think most executive recruiters are looking at C-suite members to have some proficiency of understanding how generative AI specifically can be adopted in their specific areas. So if it's marketing or if it's finance or HR, you need to have that point of view. I usually try to think of it in terms of individual user productivity, right? So if you're using a tool like Copilot or using, Apple's like artificial intelligence or whatever, that is like something which I think it's just new ways of working. And then I categorize everything else into more, how do you really rethink generating insights from the data that you have? And, some of that data may be synthetically created in the future.
I'll jump in with a comment there. I had this awesome Matrix moment a while back with you, Jepsen. We were on the phone, we were talking one night, and I was like, so I got to bend the spoon, and Jepsen's like, there is no spoon. With agentic AI, what turns to happen is when you start thinking about AI as a general purpose technology, and you can apply it broadly across your entire business, and its impact to transform, we just mentioned about productivity, operational efficiency, competitive differentiation to your brand. So my advice, just to get to the answer, is practice pragmatism, but employ it through a framework where what I did at Major League Soccer, and we're a sport entity, right? We are not necessarily defined as a tech company. And so we built a framework where there were 3 layers of it. It was organizational, it was business unit, and then there was a product strategy with AI. And so the idea was, organizationally, we focused on workforce enablement, and that's where productivity and operational efficiency came in. And for us, it was as simple as just buying enterprise ChatGPT, deploying Microsoft Copilot, and just getting the employee base started with leveraging some level of generative AI to get more productive or more efficient in what they do every day. It didn't have to be, let's go train an LLM. It didn't have to be all this, crazy complexity to your infrastructure. It was more around how can we get started and how can we change the culture. The other layers require a little more due diligence and a lot more complexity, but at least you can get started with it. So that would be my advice.
Good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on this. I'd say you're doing the first step, right, is in here, and continuing that. The continuing education piece is huge. Several things we did early days was set up AI governance boards, basically. Governance is the wrong term, but AI board, which made up of finance, legal, tech, to really start thinking through it at an organizational level of what that means. Manifesto, all the fun stuff went together. But on the productivity piece, as an example, so it's been roughly 2 years. So right now, our employee base, we burn through about 50 million tokens a day on basically a GPT interface. We've crossed 15 billion. I don't know if it's big or small, everybody's relative, right? That we've burned through since 2003. And so it's a productivity employee piece. It's about getting your employees engaged in doing it. I went to the extreme. I basically told employees, figure out how to use it, or somebody will probably figure out how to use it and replace you. Right? It's that level of try to figure out how your productivity work is going to happen. Now, I will say on the flip side, it's really hard to measure employee productivity. If you're in the engineering side, code in, code out, check, you can do stuff like that and throughput. But just general population, it's really hard to measure. We've just reduced our employee staff by about 4,500 employees globally. and we're implementing AI on top of that as an X factor to replace that. So get started, get everybody on board. Legal will slow you down like they always do. If anybody's from legal, sorry, but they always will slow you down. Get them in early and get them comfortable with it. Get them comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think I like to share, I think we are more focused on strategic application of AI. What does that mean? Is not starting from the tool and then try to find a use case. We really try to start with problem and understanding there is 3 kinds of AI. There's generative AI, there's predictive AI, there's something called RPA, intelligent process automation. And each one type of those AI has various application. And then we started by looking at the business process, the pain points, the journey map, and driving by figure out what are the most valuable problem we want to solve. And figure out what's the technology from AI point of view is a good application and how we can measure that success. So it's a little different, but I thought it was very rational way of applying AI in solving big problem.
I'll answer the question maybe just from a slightly different perspective, which is technology's coming, get on the train or get hit by the train. What I see happening is I think if I kind of get my time machine and go forward a few years, I think the kind of typical corporate organizational structure is about to go through a lot of change. And you can see it in a couple of the fields you've already mentioned, but service desks, engineering groups, software development organizations, like those organizations are going to change because the tooling that is now available just has dramatic impacts on productivity, how work is accomplished, how work is monitored, and overall how overall corporate missions are accomplished. I've worked with some companies today that just are not hiring any more software developers, carte blanche, because they can get more productivity by adding more tooling in than they can by adding additional humans. So I think we're about to go through a fairly dramatic organizational shift inside the corporate environment. I think that is more efficient, flatter organizations, more direct reports per manager, getting more done every day with fairly high productivity requirements.
So this group, they're further along in their data maturity process, I would hope. I'm assuming most of you that's not the thing you're necessarily concerned about right now. And if you have a mature data layer, you can have agents that are discovering derivative features that a domain expert might have. You can imagine a scenario where you'd wake up in the morning and have a new project that was suggested and potentially completed. So that's an example of some future use cases. If you wouldn't mind, what are some things that you think might be obtainable in the next 12 to 24 months that you're thinking about? Because I know you're all thinking about something that you might be able to take hold of. And so you all don't have to share your roadmaps, but I'm super curious.
I think for me, 2 things are really, very relevant right now. Whether it's agentic or using knowledge graphs, like how do you improve the data quality that a lot of folks struggle with, right? So whether it's trying to get the manufacturing or the energy utilities plant to get that data across different silos or increase the velocity of how you get it from different, devices. The other piece that I think is that if you think about certain fields where there has been less adoption of AI, like for example, engineering drawings, there is still a lot of like CAD/CAM historical documents where it's very difficult to be able to move it over into some of the newer tools that you have. So, if someone were to use a tool like Cursor along with, the historic kind of intelligence over, many years, that kind of opens up whole new ways of thinking about product design, not just from like an architectural standpoint, but also if you think about, if someone's going to create a new company where they're just going to 3D print every single thing, how can they customize a part without any, human getting involved in that loop? So I think those are 2 topics that are very interesting.
Okay, great. Anyone else? What are you dreaming about when you sleep?
I think we're about to see a lot of innovation in a couple of places. If I just put the quality of the data models and kind of what these LLMs can do to the side, I think that's a separate R&D track. What I think you'll see a lot of innovation over the next couple of years is how to get the right data at the right time into the data models. It's not an easy problem to go solve for a lot of organizations, particularly when you're talking about kind of corporate data that lives inside the corporate enterprise. And how that works is one place you'll see a lot of innovation. The second place that I expect to see innovation is around the development of much more complicated applications. Because right now I can go to an AI tool and I can develop a fairly simple application by just typing in some like chat GPT type prompts, like bolt.new is pretty impressive if you haven't looked at it. But it doesn't work well for these super complicated type applications. And I expect that if you go inside the average enterprise, their applications are extremely complicated. And I think you'll see more and more tech kind of heading that direction to be able to take on those more sophisticated problems, read in the data files and read in the architectures and read in the structures of the legacy applications, learn from those to produce the next gen application. Like that's kind of where I think this, at least from like a software development perspective, where I think a lot of this technology is going.
Love that. I'm going to piggyback off that. There's two things that we're kind of focused on right now, and one is now, one is a little bit more future facing, whereas multi-agent orchestration has some tremendous application for us right now. We're starting because it's emerging, and we're using all of the sort of available technologies. Google finally jumped in the game and released a multi-agent orchestration protocol that seems to have a good path forward called A2A. And so we're using that in combination with MCP that came from Anthropic, Model Context Protocol, and that helps us sort of add context between your large language models and all of your systems and tools that already exist in your business, like your HR business. So this thing kind of connects those two layers together. So point-to-point solutions have been great, and we built really powerful agents. What we're trying to do now is build these sophisticated, more complex applications that use multiple agents in orchestration to do some really interesting things. So that's our focus this year. Looking into the future, and where I'm excited about is we're a media rights business. We produce content. And so one of the things that we think we're going to tackle is intelligent content. Is, and I'll tell you a quick 30-second story. At Pandora, we had human beings called musicologist engineers whose job all day long was to sit there and listen to music and annotate and label the music. And they created 100 attributes, on the beat, on the tone, on the modality, on the pitch, whatever it was. And we used these human labels to power the curation, the recommendation engines, all that kind of stuff. That was 17 years of human beings doing that kind of work, right? Today, I could confidently tell you that, through embeddings and vector spaces and all this kind of work, we can automate all of that in a matter of weeks, right? And so we're transitioning into thinking about content, because if you think about fast, action-paced sport content, where the user is emotionally connected and you have to be there in real time at the moment where they are, we think this is really, really powerful for us to power in-the-moment recommendations or to really supercharge engagement. And the idea there is obviously to get into direct-to-consumer subscription models that, we could demand generation, lead acquisition like we haven't been able to do before, because now you can contextually get into the content through embeddings without doing human labeling. That is really, really interesting to us, because it could really accelerate this across all media and entertainment. It's not just applicable to sports. So it's an area that we're focused on. It's specific, it's tangent, but it's an area that we think over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to be able to tackle.
Great.
Yeah, totally agree. We are actually equally excited about the Google and the AI tool they just released. We released and finished our data platform build out for both transactional data and analytics data, and on top of GCP cloud. And now that Google has released the Vertex machine learning ops package, the multiple AI agents, aging A2A protocol, and then the AI software development kit. And so we are really excited to adopt and scale our a few dozen of AI use cases, both from office to back office and content generation for research and analysts as well. So, excellent.
What are you thinking about, Jeremy?
So-
What are you dreaming about next year?
Yeah, it's I think that the problem with this question is that generally when you ask that question, it depends on what month of the year you ask it, right? So because you ask it today, tariffs and trade are of present mind, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll give you a real example of where we see in the next 12 to 24 months why we think AI, and because of the current kind of global trade kind of wars that are going on. So in our vegetable business, we produce in really 3 major parts of the world: the U.S., India, China, and we'll ship and pack in different parts. Like we may produce in India, but pack and ship out of Netherlands, right? And so tax, trade, all that is being impacted by potential tariffs and everything else that are going on, and all the different combinations that can come out of that. And so from an AI standpoint, and really where we're at, and the agentic AI is automation of this. So if a 20% increase in tariff happens in India, what do I need to do to automatically reroute either maybe the raw product, because it's taxed at a different rate than what the finished product is, right? And so those type of automation scenario plannings in real time in the next 12 to 24 months is like, it's, we're doing that fast, right? And we're really trying to go after that. And so that's why I say the pressure of that question is a function of what you have going on with you at that day and time. If I step that point back, the other piece that we see in the next 12 to 24 months, we're a science company. We produce new active ingredients or molecules, chemistry molecules, new plants and genetics. And so we see a big piece, and I don't know, this will be on the 24 to 36 months. I don't know if we'll get it in 12, but I think 24 to 36. Is if you look at what AlphaFold has done, through Google and that nature, it's a great video on YouTube to walk you through it if you haven't seen it. But the amount of proteins basically that you can synthetically kind of create, when 1 year when they hit AlphaFold 2 dramatically change. And so we use that type of technology in new active ingredients, new biological chemistry, molecule development. And that's really a step change piece. And so I separate the question in 2 points, which is one is core business things that we're trying to move forward for us. And one is a reality of the wolf on the neck because of something that's going on globally today that we have to act. And I think AI really helps us from that scenario planning, because as soon as something trips, like these things change, as we all have seen, really quick. And so you got to be able to react as fast.
Yeah.
I think the final part I would just say is that the flip side of the positive rosiness is, if you see Black Mirror season 7, it really kind of forces us to think about, what is it that we are really trying to aspire towards, right? Because AGI and all of these buzzwords are great, but then it really has a lot of profound impact on not just our generation, but, what are we kind of creating for the future, and, what's the right balance between AI adoption and, carbon footprint. I think those are things which it's an interesting way of looking at it.
So I'll ask one more question, then I want to open up to the audience. So Jeremy said wolf on the neck. I'm going to imagine if I drop you into a scenario where you have to interact with the most conservative CFO, shutting down engineering travel, not an innovator, how would you adapt to not slow down your innovation practices? And maybe some of you are already dealing with this. So how do you partner with the CFO to get the investments you need given this new world? And you all don't have to answer this, but it's a fascinating tension that exists in the market. So
I can try. So we tend to go through this about every third, fourth quarter. And ag's been in the tank here for the last couple of years from a global ag economy standpoint. Ag's really off as a whole. You can look at any publicly traded ag company from John Deere to anybody, and you can see their stock portfolios are down at the end of the day. And so we've had this pressure coming in where we've been optimizing and moving costs out. And so anytime you're trying to put new investment in for AI, like CFOs are like, dude, we're just trying to keep the mothership going. And so good examples that we've done this with is, if I invest $1 where I get 5 to 10 back. And a good example of this for us is working capital. Ag's a long lead time. We're not widgets that manufacture every day. We plant a crop and then we harvest it 3-4 months later, and then we sell it 3 to 4 months later after that. And so we have long lead times, and we can tie up a lot of working capital in that. And so demand planning, which was a question earlier, I know, and prediction on that's a piece that we're really being able to optimize. So we can move 1% and move hundreds of millions of dollars. In my vegetable business alone, I can unlock $55 million just with 1% movement on that alone in getting the demand prediction right. And so those type of conversations with your CFOs are way more easier than honestly the human efficiency one and productivity. Even though that's the easier lever to do, just from getting your teams to write emails faster and do all that stuff, it's easier, but it's harder to put the dollar to the bottom line to your CFO to show that your employees are now 10x more efficient. Unless you're doing, code in and code out tracking, but just your HR and everybody else, it's really hard to track. So to me, that's where you go after is the money that they like, and you unlock it for them.
No, I like that KPI versus the bank account.
Yep.
So
Look, there's always an ROI discussion. And the other one I'll tell you is in our role, there always has to be a bet that you have to make, and that takes a little bit of courage. And I've made some decisions to pull levers. I took a note out of Jack Dorsey's book. I challenged my entire team. If you want headcount, you're going to have to prove to me that AI can't do this job. And some of that resulted in AI can do this job. And so we translated labor cost into AI investment so that we can get some of the stuff done. In other areas, we went out and we raised capital with partners who were willing to come with us on this journey and invest for the narratives and the stories that we wanted to tell. Similar to Jepsen, I'm going out and I'm raising funding, and I'm trying to build these stories with partners who are collectively on the mission with us and on this journey. So there's a lot of levers you can pull. It doesn't always have to be a traditional business case with an ROI up front. Sometimes there's some other complementary things that you can do to sort of get AI going and moving and solve the problem on your own. So
I agree. I agree with you. I sit on a couple of boards of IT services firms, and I've seen a lot of these business cases over the last, I would say, year. It's very easy to make the business case in software development or places that you can easily measure. It's been more challenging other places. Like I've seen presentations on automating back office roles and automating finance roles, and it's just it's more difficult to prove the return on investment. Kind of one theme I have seen, particularly on the software development roles, is this Amazon use case just coming up and up and up again, where they upgraded Java across thousands of servers and saved something like, I don't remember the exact numbers, so don't quote me on it, but like 3 million man hours or something that would have normally taken. So I've seen there's good where things are measurable. It's an easy ROI case. Where it's not measurable, it's a little bit more of hope and pray. But the key is to get the measurements in place so the ROI justification can be made.
Well, I think we're going to stop at 5 after so we probably have time for 1 to 3 questions. We'll try to go quickly. And for this, we'll do lightning response. So if you have a question, 30-second response. If you don't have a question, then I'll be selfish and ask one. Okay.
Consumer or customer modeling and really potentializing your ROI from your customer base. So it's the modeling of them, understanding the demand trends, and then using the predictive tools to potentialize your revenue.
I'll tell you 2 things. One is there's ways. We've been doing that for a long, long time. There's ways though, and I think you should talk to Jepsen because he could come in and optimize every single model that we have with his tech. I've seen it. But one of the things that we are starting to do now is combining financial data with consumer behavior data, and we're doing so in a unique way. I'm not going to get into the tech of it, but the point being is we're doing dynamic pricing where before, for ticket sales, for example, this used to take regular offline models and all stuff. We're doing all this in real time now, just simply with unique, more modern methods that are very, very efficient, and we're seeing the lift is dynamically different than what it used to be. So, I would tell you that there's an easy path for that. I think the challenge is just data. I don't think it's the method. I think it's just making sure that you have all of the input signals that you need in order to come out with the most efficient, response that you would need for that situation.
Yeah. We're using a lot of customer relationship data from our CRM system, but we're also using Web Insights that tracking, what product has been clicked by whom, and analyzing that data to help predict the best leads for our sales team. So that has been quite productive. Yeah. Love to share more. Yeah.
I have one other very quick question, really, for Jeremy, I think it is. The question of logistics, obviously, you're in a FMCG business. So logistics planning is going to be a huge question. You spoke about tariffs. So it's not just tariffs, but it's also the question of logistics and how you move product around the world to get to the markets. What sort of tools are you using from AI to achieve that, the optimization?
Yeah, unfortunately, I would say we're not doing too much on the actual logistics side of that, besides basic route optimization of trucks and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that's not one piece where we've done. A little bit has to do with our business model. For most of the products we sell B2B, and then that goes to C. And so we're generally very large bulk straight to the B2B for a lot of the product. The bigger thing that we're trying to do now, more so from a logistics operation, gets to the demand plan. So for an example, what do we think is the outbreak of a certain insect in the Brazil market, so that we know how much insecticide we need to produce and ship to Brazil versus maybe to India or the US. So looking at that regional logistics piece for us is more important to optimize, because once our inventory gets to a wholesaler or a distributor, it's stuck, right? And we can't pull it back and get it to somewhere else that could be potentially, more bottom line impact. And so that's where we're actually at from our standpoint, is looking at more demand prediction of agronomic, in a sense, factors that dictate what of our products are going to be used.
My question is to Feifei mainly. What's your view on use of AI in functions such as market making or like dynamic portfolio optimization? Given there is it creates a strong possibility or a challenge in like either a systematic bias or a unintended feedback loop or even destabilization.
I think, again, to answer your question, we've been using AI for portfolio optimization, construction, for pricing illiquid assets like municipal bonds. We have achieved some good outcome because those data is not available in the market anyway. And I think the model is generate good enough insights to be able to giving trading ideas. However, to answer your question, our portfolio manager and traders still have the decision rights to review and to make sense of it. And I think it's still a combination of both AI insights and human interaction. Yeah.
I'll just add one more point about the bias thing, and I mean this generally, not specific to portfolio, but one of the things that we're doing on the consumer side, just to guard and put some guardrails around anything that we generate through our AI chatbot, is we take whatever the result was and we hit the endpoints that OpenAI and Anthropic now offer. So they have things like constitutional AI frameworks, and OpenAI has an actual API endpoint that you can hit, give the response to it, and it'll come back and sort of assess. They have an LLM assessment on whether or not they've introduced bias or you've introduced bias into your response. So there are programmatic ways that we're starting to use these tools in order to sort of help us guard against bias until you can implement full transparency into your design. So
last question, and then we'll go.
Was there a specific use case that you weren't able to solve traditionally that led to this choice, or is it just experimentation? And then if you could unravel that use case a little further down the layers to say, what does it do? And maybe it's early because you don't have any benchmark or numbers to compare with. What does it do? And in the context of inferencing, really, scaling, cost, latency, and potentially a question around arbitration if you're using multimodal.
Yeah. So by the way, latency is a major issue for real-time application, and it's something that we realized early on that multi-agents and every step of the way when you start orchestrating these adds latency across the board, and so there's things that you have to sort of manage through that process. The other one that I'll tell you that we had to mitigate was this concept of when you're introducing agentic flows in real time, you have to think about step functions, things like controlling what happens if the transaction breaks in the middle of the time. So there was a lot of sort of assumptions that we went into it, and then all of a sudden we had to work out things like state and memory and what are we doing with this midway. The use case that we had was digital deflection. The MLS, digital deflection. So we just like everybody else, it was like the easiest ROI was customer support, ticket sale transactions, this, that. And we wanted to solve it in a new immersive way, but we also wanted to deflect from you having to call. So there's an easy ROI to do digital deflection in call centers. It's one of the reasons why I think, the market sort of went to the chatbot interface to begin with. We had a hard time thinking about all of our partner solutions. We didn't benefit from the fact that we could build everything from scratch in a modern way. So we had a lot of legacy architecture we had to deal with. And so how do you start connecting in a standard way legacy architecture with an LLM? And this is where MCP kind of came to life for us. We sort of fell into it, started using it. So one clear example was we connected Ticketmaster and their entire API infrastructure, which is a little bit of a legacy system, with LLM, and we were able to do some really interesting things. The one last thing I'll comment on, and I'll just piggyback off something that was said before, software development is going to absolutely radically change. And what people don't understand, that it's very subtle, but I would tell you for the last 50 years, roughly, we've been developing software in the same way, meaning like it is very explicit and it is very deterministic. An engineer has to program the logic, an engineer has to make the connection to the data, an engineer has to say, here's what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. In a way, we tell the software exactly what to do, and that's it. And what that does is it limits your upside into what this software can do, unless you add more and more value over time. What this is allowing us to do, what MCP and A2A allow us to do, is it allows us to connect the source system, let's say a Ticketmaster, to the LLM, without necessarily telling the machine what it is that we're trying to do, right? And so we're just teaching the LLM how to interface with Ticketmaster, but the LLM is figuring out how to use it. And so as use cases come up, it's the LLM that is answering the consumer need, and it kind of says, do I know how to do this or do I don't? And if it feels like it has enough context with what it can do with Ticketmaster, it'll go and it'll do it. And so it's a very subtle change, but it is fundamentally profound in the capabilities that it's allowing us to do. So, we'll see if the community continues to endorse MCP. It's a standard that Anthropic created, and it's given us a new path to move forward. For now, it seems like that's a great place to start, and so that's what we're using. But that was the use case that started it, and then from there, we started building all these different agents. We said, oh, well, if we can get you a ticket, we'll get you a ride. If we can get you a ride, we'll get you food. If we can get you food, we'll get you back home. And it became sort of this multi-agent sort of facet for our consumers. So that was the starting use case.
I just want to add one thing, is that, so we're on the same path, but what I see is it makes our internal software teams actually easier to work with each other, because of this very point. Like, one software team can build the agent against their APIs and that type of component, and then the agents talk, right?
Yeah.
Every press release for the next 2 years will be my agent's talking to your agent,
Yeah.
right? At the end of the day, it was always API integrations were the historical press releases, right? It will be agent to agent communication as we go forward.
No. Well, so I think that's a wrap. Let's give them a hand of applause.
Thank you.